Hello, NBA fans. My name is Matt Eppers. I am a digital producer at USA Today Sports, and welcome to the NBA Roundtable. Every episode, we'll convene a panel of our NBA experts from around the USA Today network to break down the league's biggest storylines and the hottest topics. In our debut episode, I'm joined by Mark Medina and Jeff Zilgett of USA Today Sports, and our network colleague Dwayne Rankin of the Arizona Republic. And we're going to dive into the Lakers, the Suns, and the triple-double machine that is Russell Westbrook. Let's get right to it with the Lakers at the top. And it feels a bit like picking at low-hanging fruit to talk Lakers drama on our first episode, but given the state of the team recently, I feel like we have to. LeBron James and Anthony Davis are still playing themselves back from injury, and they're in a fight to maintain a top 6 seed and avoid the new play-in tournament. Mark, you're closer to this team than the rest of us. They are, of course, never going to say that they're panicking. I don't necessarily want to say that they're panicking, but how concerned should the Lakers be right now?
Well, I think that there's been a heightened level of concern for a number of reasons. One, as much as the Lakers have downplayed the importance of records or home court advantage, the reality is they don't want to be in a play-in tournament because that makes themselves more vulnerable, and it also adds potentially up to 2 extra games. The other reality is that it doesn't take a basketball coach or a genius to know that the health and effectiveness in LeBron James and Anthony Davis are going to play the largest factor in their ability to defend an NBA championship. And that is kind of up in the air because LeBron James has had to, sit recently in Monday's game against the Denver Nuggets with his right ankle injury that sidelined him for up to 20 games previously, and Anthony Davis is shedding off his rust. So it's up in the air. My hunch is that if they're able to stay within the top 6, avoid the play-in tournament, they'll be fine because LeBron and AD will shed their rust. I trust that they will be healthy long term. But if they're in the play-in tournament, all bets are off, especially if they wind up matching up against the Golden State Warriors and that really good shooter named Steph Curry.
Jeff, what are your thoughts on the Lakers right now?
Well, Mark hit on a couple of those points, although I'm not sure how safe this team is, even if they get into the round of, they're in the final 6 teams right there and don't have to play the play-in game. They could potentially see the Los Angeles Clippers or the Denver Nuggets in the first round if they stay where they are at 5 or 6. And I think that's of concern to the Lakers. And also, I'm not sure that I'm sold that LeBron is going to be healthy long term. The high ankle sprain is something that could linger, and this has the potential to really derail their season. And so, they do have reason to be concerned, and they do want to avoid the play-in game. And I think you add all this up, and there's real reasons to be concerned that the Lakers are going to have difficulty repeating as NBA champions.
So you come at this, from a Suns perspective. How vulnerable do the Lakers seem right now to some of the other teams in the Western Conference?
They just beat Denver without LeBron. So I don't know. I just don't see it the same. I think that, anyone doubting LeBron James, I just don't think that's a safe bet. The guy has proven time and time again. I get this is the longest stretch he's been out. I get what kind of injury it is, but you don't spend the money he spent on getting his body right. You don't come into the league with this package that no one else has ever had that's lasted this long and think, oh, well, he's not going to be right. What I would be worried about is just how this is going to work. They only got a certain amount of time to get this right as a collective. That seems to be the bigger issue for me. I mean, can Davis and LeBron know how to play with each other? Drummond doesn't. So how do they put him in this whole thing and see that he can be a part of this and be a factor? Because I think he should be a factor moving forward. But making all the pieces work and then trying to get them right before they get ready to play. This season's been out of whack all year. I mean, guys have been hurt, COVID, so to expect the unexpected is what we should be expecting. So, if LeBron and they get right in terms of them as a group, I don't see no reason why they can't make a deep run in the playoffs. Now, if they lost to Denver or the Clippers in the first round, only thing worse than that is going in the play-in, as Mark said, and lose to Golden State, and then have to play that last winner-take-all, let's say Memphis or someone like that, and then lose again. Somebody might get fired.
Does it ultimately come down to health for the Lakers, particularly to LeBron and AD?
Without a doubt. Number one is health. Number two is team chemistry, and that's usually how it is for most NBA teams, specifically with the Lakers. There's no way around it. LeBron James and Anthony Davis, they're the pillars of the team for obvious reasons. They're two of the top 5 players in the league right now. You can make a case. And it's not like the Lakers are playing with scrub teammates per se, but they were constructed to complement LeBron James and Anthony Davis, not to play without them. But I think the reason why I'm relatively optimistic about this, a lot of it goes down to LeBron James and the nature of his injury. You never know with any of these things, but when he suffered the injury, I talked with a handful of outside medical experts about the nature of high ankle sprains, and they said, look, as long as he's doing the right rehab and not rushing it, it's something that shouldn't have long-term effects. Now, since then, LeBron has said, look, I'm never going to be 100% in my career, and the fact that he had to sit out Monday's game against Denver after only playing 2 games might raise some red flags, but I think that there is some gray area with that. Frank Vogel stressed that this doesn't necessarily mean there's been any setbacks. The reality is that a lot of this points to the fact that because of the condensed nature of the schedule, LeBron James's return to play has been altered. He hadn't had a chance to get substantial practice time with teammates, getting into any live scrimmaging. So the only way to really test out how his ankle is doing is to see how it looks in a game. And so a lot of these times when there is this return to play, a player might not be experiencing a setback, but they have to kind of restart and let time pass to see how the ankle responds. And that's what he's dealing with. But I think that even if the remaining regular season games aren't necessarily enough time for the chemistry to get going, specifically with Andre Drummond, I trust that that is enough time for LeBron to get those practice simulations, so to speak, to test out his ankle. And by the playoffs start, I think that he'll be rolling.
In terms of some of those other pieces, Mark, that you mentioned, they've brought in a lot of vets to sort of supplement them. One of those is Dennis Schroeder. He is going to be out for, I believe, up to about 2 weeks. He's going to be in the league's health and safety protocols. How does that affect how the Lakers approach the final couple weeks?
Well, it affects a lot of things. I mean, look, the Lakers were able to make do against the Denver Nuggets on Monday's game. That's a recipe to follow, but I think when a lot of times when teams are missing significant players, there is that kind of feeling of put all hands on deck, and that might be a recipe to win a game or two, but long term it isn't. Specifically how this affects the Lakers with Schroeder's absence, as long as LeBron James continues to be absent, the Lakers are without their 2 ball-dominant playmakers, and so all of a sudden they're going to have to shift those responsibilities to Alex Caruso and Taylor Horton-Tucker. And look, I think that they are great players, but they're role players. They're not substitutes to those kind of guys. And so not only does it shift a lot of the burden on them, but it also puts Frank Vogel in a position to have to tweak his rotations even more and see what else he can do with the center position. There was already a feeling of discomfort of why Frank Vogel hasn't used this time to start tightening the rotation to know what he's going to go with the playoffs. But I think because of the hands that the Lakers are dealt with, or there's guys in and out of the lineup, I think it's to Frank Vogel's best interest to continue to widen the rotation, both for matchup purposes and to make guys become ready on any given notice. But we'll have to see how that plays out long term. And maybe in the short term, this reduces some of the challenges because there is still a window that LeBron could come back.
LeBron is saying that seeding isn't going to be an issue for the Lakers. But do we agree with that? Are there any particular or any potential matchups, first round matchups that the Lakers might be eyeing a little cautiously?
Again, the Clippers. I mean, I'm sorry. I mean, that's not what you want to be opening up against in the first round. But I say all that because the Suns are kind of going through the same thing. They're like, well, if you end up playing this team in the first round, or if you end up playing them in the second round, I mean, look, you got to go through what you got to go through to get there anyway. And I get the less stress of it, the better. But I mean, if you play the Clippers and get them knocked out of the way, then you're just eliminated a favorite. So that helps your chances moving forward. So I just think but that matchup in particular, you're asking now LeBron to guard somebody he probably shouldn't be trying to guard on a bum ankle. Kawhi or Jordan or whoever, either one of those, a situation you're gonna have to guard one of those two. Clippers are just, golly, Mark, you know better than I do, but the talent level to me is just off the charts when I look at that team. They added Rondo. I mean, that's how good that talent is there. That matchup to me, don't like it for the Lakers right out the gate, considering the lack of time they're going to have to get ready. I just don't like that matchup.
Yeah, on paper, I don't like that matchup either, and I like what the Clippers did with adding Rajon Rondo. He's a great playmaker, and he has that nickname Playoff Rondo for a reason. And I think the most important part is he, can improve the culture with having this team accountability atmosphere, and that is something that last year was lacking, where they didn't have that in the locker room, and they didn't have guys like Kawhi Leonard and Paul George feeling comfortable with being that guy. And I still don't think they're comfortable with being that guy. And Rajon Rondo is fully comfortable with being that guy. And he also has the credibility to call out people, whether it's a star player or a role player. That being said, though, I think the Clippers are still a team that is dangerous on paper, but it also remains to be seen, are they as equally dangerous in reality? Even with all the changes that they made, with getting a better front court player in Serge Ibaka and letting Montrezl Harrell go to the Lakers, getting a Rajon before the trade deadline, and putting in a new voice with elevating Ty Lue. The Clippers have still been wildly inconsistent, and they've also had a lot of different injuries, most notably to Kawhi and Paul. And as a result, there's been so many different lineup combinations, different starting lineups. So while there may have been new prescriptions, so to speak, to address their symptoms from last year, the symptoms are still there. And so that's where it makes the Clippers vulnerable. And how this applies to the Lakers. Look, the Lakers, again, their fortunes rest on how healthy they are and subsequently how great chemistry they have. And if they meet the Clippers in a 4 or 5 matchup, it doesn't matter what seeding there is, because A, the home court advantage is not as much of a factor because there's reduced fans in the building. But B, even if the Lakers are going to be the 5 seed, there's still going to be more Laker fans in the building anyway. There's so many variables. We know what they are, but because we're in complicated times with a unique season under unique circumstances, we don't know how all those puzzle pieces are going to fit.
LeBron says playoff seeding isn't going to matter that much for the Lakers. But what about some of the teams at the top of the West for whom seeding might be a little bit more important? Dwayne, how significant is the number 1 seed for a team like the Suns?
Very, very significant. Again, Chris Paul, he's been there, he's done it. Jay Crowder has, but we're talking about Devin Booker, DeAndre Ayton, Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson. They haven't seen any of this at all. So the weaker the opponent they can play, the better. What's interesting about looking at the 4 teams that they could end up playing if they end up a 1 seed, it's Portland right now, Golden State, Memphis, and San Antonio. San Antonio just beat them by 26 without 3 guys at home. Memphis has guys that they're going to compete, so that could be an interesting series. Golden State, don't like that Steph Curry first round series with them, but I think they have obviously a much better team than Golden State. Curry's one player. The Suns are great as a collective. And then you're looking at Portland. They kind of had their way with Portland. Phoenix they won the first 2 games, won a really good one in Portland and just dominated them in Phoenix by 32, I believe was the final score it won by. So, I don't think I think that they can handle those 4 if they end up a 1 seed, but you don't want to be a 3 seed and end up having to play, say, that could be Dallas, I guess. You don't want to drop because the Suns, if you're the Suns, you're thinking, we'll handle this first round. It's the next round where we want that home court advantage. The first round they should be able to handle. The next round is the one that, you want to have the home court. And so to me, and also I think from a mental point of view, this team has been a surprise, obviously, in the league. But now this is what's expected. They went from, oh, well, it'd be good if they made the playoffs to, oh, they're pretty good to, oh, wow, they got a chance to win it all. And so you don't want to just plot here these last 6-7 games and then end up a 3 and then sitting around and going, what happened? That's not the way you want to go into the postseason. Chris Paul will have them right. There's no doubt about that. Monty Williams will have them right. So that's not the issue. The issue is you got young guys who haven't been here, and you want every mental advantage possible going into the postseason. And being a 1 seed will really work for them in all those facets. And this team, they've beaten Utah. They swept Utah. So if they're tied, they're going to get the 1 seed. So of course, I mean they have a lot of goals that are hidden. They don't want to reveal the list, but I'm sure that when you look at being a number 1 seed after not making the playoffs, after having not made the playoffs in 11 years, that would be a huge accomplishment for them and a good, absolutely outstanding springboard going into the postseason.
Jeff, what are your thoughts on the Suns?
Well, let me just real quick. There's a reason LeBron doesn't care about seeding. He wasn't always the 1 seed in Miami. Right. He wasn't always the 1 seed in Cleveland. And he had to win road games in a 3-1 series in which he's down against Golden State. Has to win Game 5 on the road, has to win Game 7 on the road. He doesn't care. But there's a reason that Dwayne is talking about where it does matter to these other teams. Even the Utah Jazz, it matters to them. Look at their record at home. These teams want to win Game 1 of a series. You don't want to be down 1-0 in these series, especially when you're a team like Phoenix, for the reasons Dwayne laid out. Even the Utah Jazz. Now, the Denver Nuggets, look, they have that experience, even though there wasn't home court, road advantage, disadvantage in the bubble. They had the experience of needed to win a must-win game. And so that's why I do think it becomes important for some of these other teams to have the number 1 seed. And I was just looking, Phoenix plays really well at home this year, but they've also been, and Dwayne knows this, they've played well on the road too. I mean, there's a reason that, there's a reason that, they're a half a game out as we stand here talking today, among the best teams in the NBA. You play well at home, you play well on the road, but I do think there is that little edge that you gain from knowing there's the comfort level. And players talk about this all the time, except probably LeBron, is there is that comfort of being in your home environment. I know travel is so much different for teams this year. I know there's not fans, but look at home road records this year. the good teams do play well at home. And, it does matter. LeBron likes to say that home court advantage only matters if there's a game 7. Sooner or later, a team needs to win on the road to prove themselves. But given their choices, teams always want home court. And that's why I think it is important to a team like Utah and Phoenix, who, probably haven't advanced as far in the playoffs with the group of guys they have, in previous seasons. And so, again, I think the same thing applies to some of the teams in the East, especially Philadelphia. Brooklyn would love that as well. Milwaukee, probably a little less so, even though they have not reached the NBA Finals. They know the rigors of needing to go on the road and win a game. And, that's why when we sit here and talk about it, the team with the better there's a reason the team with the better record gets that advantage.
And just really quick follow on the Suns. They had 6,000 fans for their last game. I mean, the number is going up and up. The limit is supposed to be 5,500 plus. I think come postseason, you can see easily 7,000 in there. And listen, I haven't been around the rest of the league in terms of being at other arenas because obviously travel reduced because of COVID, but it gets loud. It gets loud for especially when you think about these players haven't been in arenas with fans all year. So all of a sudden you walk in there and you're like, whoa, like what is this? And I think that's going to be an advantage for Phoenix being at home to have that kind of fan support. Again, if it's up to 7,000, 7,500, that plays a role in terms of again, and for a young team that can feed off of that. Devin Booker's been waiting 5 years to play in the playoffs. He's already saying it sounds like 9,000 or 10,000 is in the building from the last game that they played at home. So you got some eager guys that want to get after it, and having that fan support bodes well for them going into the postseason.
I can't remember who it was recently. A player mentioned that he was surprised at just how loud 3,000 fans really sounded, especially after not playing in front of fans for so long. Let's shift gears a little bit for our third topic to the one Russell Westbrook. He's been making some waves lately. Jeff, you recently wrote a story titled "Russell Westbrook is a triple-double machine, so why do so many hate his game?" It's been a month of more eye-popping numbers from Russ since that story was published, and the narrative around him is much the same, it seems. So, Jeff, why do so many seemingly still hate Russell Westbrook's game?
Look, we've entered this age of efficiency. We had the age of enlightenment. Now we have the age of efficiency. And look, if you look at some of Russ's shooting numbers, you combine it sometimes with this high turnover rate. And that's where the criticism comes from in this age. But I was saying earlier today, I think the criticism spills over into hyper-criticism. And we're really criticizing a guy who's going to be a Hall of Famer. And the one thing is I start to dig into the numbers a little bit. And look, there's the caveat that he did play with really, really good teams in Oklahoma City and in Houston. But his triple doubles, they result in victories. And of his 100, and I think he's at 177 as of taping right now, triple doubles, a few behind Oscar Robertson for the all-time record. And he is 144 and 34 when it comes to his one-loss record with triple-doubles. All right, so let's just say a majority of them, yes, are with Oklahoma City, some with Houston. The Wizards are 19 and 13, which is a really good record for this Wizards team, considering everything that they've had to go through this year. And so I think we're hypercritical of Russ. I think we also probably don't appreciate what he does enough. When you're talking about a 20 assist, 20 rebound triple-double, it's almost unheard of. And the only other guy we hear of doing it is Wilt Chamberlain. And so, again, I understand when the efficiency folks come out and start complaining about some of Russ's numbers and everything. How many coaches around the league would love the effort that guy gives on a regular basis? And then I don't think these are always empty stats, as I point out, the one-loss record. And so, I think we're starting to look a little silly with the amount of criticism that we throw on Russ for the way he plays.
Well, Mark, if you want to go before me, that's cool. I'll pass the ball to you. Like Russ passes the ball, I'll pass the ball to you. Go ahead.
All right, I'll catch it here. I appreciate it, Dwayne. Look, I think as Jeff mentioned, there oftentimes, especially unfortunately in our field and in general, there's sometimes overreaction to the reaction, over criticism to the criticism. So I think that there were certainly legitimate questions to be asked about how Russ plays his game. Does he sometimes turn off teammates? Is he making the right decisions, i.e. with the turnovers? There certainly were feelings, particularly toward the later years in Oklahoma City, that some of his triple-doubles were empty calories. But I think that is also overlooking the positive aspects. Look, I know I am in the minority on this, but I believe it and I'll own it. I think the Rockets made the right decision in getting Russell Westbrook last year. And obviously that blew up in their face because Chris Paul was really good and he was fighting Father Time really well. But at the time, Chris Paul was coming off a lot of injuries with the Rockets in consecutive seasons. And there's no way around it. He and James Harden wound up having a lot of conflict. And I think when I'm looking at the season that Russ had in Houston, while there may have been things that came out after the fact of him and Harden not really being on the same page and him not liking how the Rockets culture was, a lot of that had to do with more of how practices were conducted and just the overall culture. I think on the court, the dynamic really worked well because, Harden would do his isolation heavy plays and plotting pace while Westbrook would bring the other element of going 100 miles an hour and getting easy shots at the rim. And so I think it was a good yin and the yang. And so how this applies to Washington, I think it's carried over where there's been a really good dynamic between him and Bradley Beal. And even if Westbrook has at times this demanding personality, it all seems to come from a good place where he's trying to establish the tone and make everyone better. And that's something that you always have to credit him, that he is that 82 gamer where the effort's never a concern and there's always this level of consistency.
I just think just really quick, just to piggyback off what you guys said, Russ's game has always been hard. It's never been an easy game. I mean, he goes to the rim relentless. Everything is just rough. That's the turnoff because it's not smooth like Steph Curry. It's not smooth like Kyrie. He doesn't have that kind of game. It's relentless, in-your-face style, and that turns off people who can't seem to get out of what they're used to seeing with other guys. But I'm just going to be honest. I've been a fan of his since he came into the league because of his relentless nature. When Kobe Bryant says that Russ has the mentality that he has, that's check mark that you can play. So all this other stuff about what he does, I get the turnovers, I get all that. But the guy is a box office, and he's made Washington worth watching again. I mean, they had Bradley Beal the leading scorer, and it was like, whatever. Now Russ is playing the way he's playing. It's like, oh, wow, they could be interested in the playoffs. That doesn't happen without Russell Westbrook.
Yeah, just a real quick point. I'm sorry, Matt. Look, I'll wrap it up here with Russ. I also think it helps that Scott Brooks is the coach of that Wizards team. They had that experience together with Oklahoma City. Scott Brooks loves Russell Westbrook. There's a connection there that works. And I do think, to Mark's point about maybe Russ wasn't always the best teammate or rubbed teammates the wrong way, you do see a difference in the way Russ approaches teammates this year. You see him coaching a younger Cassius Winston during a timeout, or talking to Daniel Gafford about where to be or where he should have been. And you see more and more of that of Russ, and maybe that's a sign of his, maturation and how he's becoming a different player as he gets into a different part of his career.
I think sometimes there's a lot there's a lot more focus and on what a player can't do rather than what a player can do and does bring to the table. And I've heard people in recent years sort of lament that this mentality sort of creeping into draft narratives. When you really focus on what Russell Westbrook does do, the results are tough to argue with. As you mentioned, Jeff, he's got an overwhelming winning record, in those games when he posts a triple-double. So in terms of the Wizards, he's really sort of put them on his back recently. They've climbed to 10th in the East, and they're gaining on Charlotte and Indiana above them. What do we think are the Wizards' chances of getting one of those final 2 playoff spots in the play-in tournament?
Oh, I love it. I think that outside of the Warriors, which are the team in the West to pay attention to and play in, the Wizards are the most dangerous play-in kind of tournament, and a lot of it has to do with Russell Westbrook, with just how he can change a game, and as long as he's on the floor, you're always going to have a chance. Now, how sustaining is that? I don't think it gets them past the first round because they're going to be facing a really good top-seeded team, whether it's Philadelphia or Brooklyn or Milwaukee. But they're always going to be due for making each game competitive and having a chance to steal a game or two. And how that applies to a play-in tournament, that might just be the recipe that you need to survive and advance.
Go ahead, Jeff. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jeff.
No, you're up, Dwayne. No,
I just think that I wouldn't want to play him. I just wouldn't. I wouldn't want that in the play-in. I mean, Russell and Bradley. This backcourt. I don't think that's talked about enough about how good they are. You're talking about a supreme scorer playing with somebody who can get you 20 assists in a game. That's similar to me looking at Chris Paul and Devin Booker at the end of a game in terms of being able to close. And we all know in playoffs, it's half court, it's end of game, it's shot clock, it's half court play. And when you have those two that can do what they do on the offensive end, and Russ is going to raise the level of those guys once they get in that postseason, that play-in situation. Because I think it's a given they get in. I think that and them in Indiana, I think they can beat Indiana. And then who are the other two, Jeff? Is it that they would have to go through to?
This is a funny thing, I think. Yeah. This is a funny thing about that,
Dwayne. So let's just say they win their first game, and the Wizards get to play the loser of, say, Boston Charlotte or Boston Miami. Like, if you're the loser of that game, there's no way that you want to see the Wizards in that one game scenario, especially if you're Boston or Miami. That puts a ton of pressure on you to have to win that one game. Or even a team like Charlotte, which is trying to get playoff experience more than just a play-in game scenario. They want to get into a series. And so I do think if the Wizards win their game, it's going to make life difficult for the team that loses the 7-8 game.
Right.
There's been a lot of talk recently about whether or not the play-in was a good idea, but it seems like this Wizards team and this late run that they're making is really tailor-made for what the play-in tournament was meant to be for the NBA.
Oh yeah. You're getting a team that's coming in hot. They would have been out of it, under normal circumstances, and now they're going to get a chance. And again, looking at the Wizards, Gafford. I mean, this guy's come out of nowhere and just been crazy running with. The up and down game with him and running the floor and the guys that they have. The record is very misleading. It just that idea of playing them with a one time, one take, winner advance type deal. Don't like that for any of those other three teams playing the Wizards. And again, I agree with Mark in a first round series against Philadelphia or Brooklyn. It's not happening. But I'll throw this out there. Let's say they got Milwaukee in the first round. Do they have a chance against Milwaukee? Better chance? Milwaukee, I mean, we're talking about how good they are, but they haven't proven anything either. So as far as getting to a final, so how would the Wizards stand up against Milwaukee, say, in that 7-game series?
Yeah, Dwayne, it's a fair question to be asked. I think across the league, I've always felt like because of the unique circumstances of the season, any scenario is possible. So I wouldn't be surprised if that happens, but if I had to put money on it at the Vegas tables, I wouldn't. I just think that the talent and the depth that Philadelphia, Brooklyn, Milwaukee, it's so deep compared to everyone else. And I think because of the Bucks and their playoff struggles the last 2 years, they've tried to get themselves through the regular season more with the playoff picture in mind. And I think that Giannis is going to step his game up. I like the Drew Holiday addition. So I don't think it would happen. But I think if nothing else, because of Russell Westbrook and Bradley Beal, they could certainly get a game or two. And I think by and large, they can at least make every single game feel competitive.
Right.
I think that is going to wrap it up for our first episode of the NBA Roundtable. I want to thank Jeff, Mark, and Dwayne for joining me. Thank everybody out there for watching. We really appreciate it. This has been the NBA Roundtable.